Thank you for decuing the music. I'm Michael Grimes from Morgan Stanley, and Elon Musk needs no introduction. We just flashed up the forward-looking statement disclosure. Please refer to Twitter's forward-looking statement disclosures, Morgan Stanley Research Conference website. Please refer to Tesla's public disclosures from their Investor Day, because there'll be a little bit about Tesla here today. And with that, why don't we go ahead and bring you Elon Musk direct. He doesn't get a lot of chances to speak directly to investors for this private company, Twitter, so we're going to do that with you directly here today. First is the mission, if you want to call it that. This is what we've heard you say: promote, protect public conversation, town square of the internet. How would you describe it, the mission of Twitter 2.0 under your ownership, Elon?
So the goal is to have Twitter be the best source of truth, the most timely and accurate source of truth, even if the truth is something we don't want to hear or unpleasant or whatever, but have it be timely and accurate and really just where you can really understand what's going on. And not just is something true or not, but what is the narrative? So the thing that I think most people don't, probably you do, but most people don't quite appreciate is that the media controls the narrative. So there are many things that could be talked about in the world, but only a few things can fit on the front page. So, but Twitter doesn't have a limitation like that. So the public can control the narrative, and the public can inform themselves as to what the narrative should be. That's a really big deal. So it's a forum for, I call it citizen journalism, or for the public to get together and communicate in a way that was never possible before. So you can really know what's going on. So I think that's really going to be essential for a functioning democracy. So if you say, like, what is the bedrock of a functioning democracy? It has to be free speech and a level playing field. That's why it's the First Amendment. It was the first thing they did. Like, we got to make sure freedom of speech. And why did they do that? It's because where they came from, there wasn't freedom of speech. And once you lose freedom of speech, you don't get it back. So that's why we must protect it at all costs.
Thank you. On the core principles, if we want to call them that, you just went over citizen journalism, power to the people, and a level playing field. That's what you mean by democratic. We've also heard you say core principles of authentic, informative, and entertaining, accurate, you just went over, and brand safe. Where are you on these?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of these are, a little at odds. Brand safe, I think, really means like where advertising is displayed, that the advertiser gets to choose what material is near that advertising. So if it's something, if it's some sort of like a train accident or a war scene, then probably a family-friendly brand is not going to want to advertise right next to that, Or, it can't be like, here's a bleak war scene, would you like to buy a hamburger? Would be like awkward, So that's understandable. You want to put advertising next to content where it makes sense. But the content in general needs to be authentic and informative, even if it is controversial or jarring. And I think people need to be able to choose, to some degree, what content they want to see. And of course, on Twitter, you can. But really, we want it to be the fundamentally, it's the place you go to learn what's going on and get the real story. That's what the truth, the whole truth. And it's going to be more than, I would like to say nothing but the truth. That's hard. There's going to be a lot of BS there.
Truth and more.
There's going to be lies. It's truth for sure. But you want to have the truth, and you want to bubble up the truth and be able to sort of sort out, really want truth with the least amount of error.
So you've said, Twitter is alive. Another way that's described is it's where news happens, as you just said. So a couple here, Patrick Mahomes and Steph Curry talking to each other, Rihanna speaking directly to her fans. Or in crypto, SBF and CZ were having the conversation directly on Twitter.
Yeah, that's wild.
Sam Altman, launched ChatGPT, announces it on Twitter. Paul Graham takes up a tweet on it. You're tweeting on it. I think 50,000 tweets happened there before it was picked up by the mainstream media, just in the first couple of days.
Yeah.
And so, talk to us about how can the media catch up? If they're on Twitter, they can be seeing these tweets and posting it. If they're not on Twitter, is there no way to catch up? Like, how does the traditional media and citizen journalism and 50,000 tweets on an important subject, how do those intersect, and how does the media catch up?
Well, just as I'm sure many of you use Twitter, everything in Twitter is happening in real time. So if you contrast that to what's happening in a newspaper, they have to learn the information, propose an article to their editor, get it approved, write the article, get it edited, figure out which day it's going to get published on. And so the news is actually, the thing that happened is being reported on at 3-4 days, sometimes a week late. And if it happens on a weekend, then it's like, at least 3 days type of thing. So ChatGPT was huge news for several days on Twitter before there was any news articles about it in major publications. So I think especially if one is, say, thinking about investing in things, you want to have information that is as timely and accurate as possible. There's no better source than Twitter for that. That's
certainly been my experience. So Paul Graham, who's a legend in tech, a legend on Twitter, I think he has tweeted that he's 80% left-leaning, probably, if he had to put him on the scale. So not someone, who's not deemed and revered by all sides of the spectrum. He has said, consistent with your accuracy point, he has said how important accuracy is. And on Twitter, he said, you should be default skeptical of any news story about Twitter and assume it's default wrong, because not only do some journalists have the agenda, but the source has the agenda, and it's so easy to go through the chain of inaccuracy or, outright falsehood. Is he right about this? And, if so, how can accuracy about Twitter and about you be conducted by the traditional media, if at all? Does a PR department help, which we famously don't have?
PR departments, I have, the right name for PR is propaganda. And I always thought, maybe we should have like a VP of propaganda. That would be, I think just more honest, and also a VP of witchcraft. I thought that would be like, those would be two great ones. So, I mean, the thing that if you pick up any given newspaper and go through and read the whole thing and say, how many of those stories are positive about anything at all? Almost none. So if something is newsworthy, it is going to have a negative slant, whether it is positive or not. There's like something in journalism that they've been trained to basically never write a positive story about anything. Once in a while you see a puff piece, but it's rare. So anything that's newsworthy will get written about. Anything that's written about will go through a negativity lens, and so you therefore have a bizarrely negative view of the world if you draw your information from newspapers. This is simply, a fact. So on Twitter, you can get a much more balanced positive-negative situation. It doesn't have that bias quite as much. It's probably still a little bit of negativity bias, but much less so. So I think it's really, I'm not sure what the legacy media does. At this point, really. Twitter is, by the way, the #1 news app in the world. So in terms of what people download for news, it's #1. There's 500 million active users, 250 million daily users, of which I'd say there's probably, 180 million what I call significant daily users, where it's a meaningful amount of time. So like the average amount of time that people spend on Twitter per day, of that 250 million, is around half an hour or so. So what we have is the thing that's like I think most interesting is there's about 120 to 130 million hours of human attention per day on Twitter, every single day on average. Which is, I think, comes to a really interesting point, which is it's startling how poorly monetized that is, because you have to say, like, how valuable is that attention? 130 million hours of human attention per day, of people that read. So these are generally the smartest people in the world, the most influential people in the world, and you have 130 million hours of their time per day. That's a lot. So currently, Twitter makes about 5 or 6 cents per hour of that time. I think this is poorly monetized.
Paul Graham's attention, Paul Graham's half hour of attention is worth more than that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm spending 2 hours a day on Twitter, like whatever ads are coming through are getting my attention, getting your attention, getting everyone in the room's attention. Your time is incredibly valuable. So now the thing is, we need to actually serve ads that are relevant and useful. And I think as we do that, we can probably at least get it to like 15 cents an hour, 20 cents an hour. Yeah, a quarter. Yeah.
Right.
So I think the actual potential here for Twitter revenue is gigantic. And it's going to be a win-win situation, which is that if you are served advertising that you find timely and relevant, with products and services that are useful to you, that's good for you and good for the advertiser. Advertising in the limit of relevance is content.
So in the next theme that's out there that's often an inaccurate narrative is that you're indifferent to misinformation or other narratives get put out in the media, that you actually want misinformation on Twitter when, as you've just stated, you want it to be the most accurate in the world. So community notes, I'm going to breeze through a couple of these before asking you about them. Community notes are the fact-checking by power of the people on Twitter. Yeah. So correcting government misstatements from the White House, correcting candidate misstatement from failed gubernatorial candidate Kari Lake that Ron DeSantis had been endorsed by George Soros, adding context while the spy balloon was over Billings, Montana, to a tweet that could have been taken to spiral and mean it had been shot down over Billings with that photo, and adding context to that, preventing a conspiracy theory of train derailments are purposeful or nefarious, as opposed to 1,700 per year, quickly corrected before a right-wing conspiracy theory could get going. Company misstatements, or misstatements about companies, I should say. So the tweet that said, Google set a badge machine to tell you if you were terminated or not, and adding context that, no, they had been emailed on Coinbase, that they'd been told they had to stop staking by regulators. Fact-checked very, very quickly. So how can this scale, this neutral fact-checking, which seems elusive in fact-checking, but Twitter seems to have a handle on it, but how does it scale, and how does it avoid being hijacked by either side of an issue or political spectrum trying to hijack community notes to not have it be neutral? There's a white paper on community notes that I recommend reading. In fact, I'll tweet it out so that people can have easy access to it. But because it's really quite a clever idea. It takes the viewpoint of someone. Think of it in a way like PageRank for pages as applied to people, which is that as people build credibility in how they review notes, they build up enough credibility to actually write notes.
And then those notes are then rated by others. And depending upon the credibility of the people rating your note, your credibility score gets affected. So it's sort of like a collection of credibility.
PageRank.
PageRank for credibility.
But there were link farms created in faraway places to spam PageRank, so that's going to be attempted, but you're going to apply your software skills and things to prevent that.
In order to be a notes contributor, you have to be a verified person.
I see.
Yeah. So you have to have, and it takes a while to get verified. You can't suddenly, you will have no, when you just start out, you will start off with no credibility score.
Yeah, so it's very hard to link farm.
Yes. And when we actively look at any attempts to game the system and shut them down and remove them from the system if they're determined to be not real people or if they seem to be brigading. Because there are deliberate attempts to manipulate community notes. We also make the community notes source code is open and available, so you can basically see everything. So
that's in the white paper or linked?
It's not on the white paper, but it's available on the internet.
Okay, it's available.
Yeah, you can search for it. So you can see exactly how community notes is calculating things, what changes are made to community notes, and we'll keep iterating. And the goal is to have truth with the least amount of error. So, there's always like, what is truth? And I think the important, like, one way to sort of, for example, say like, if someone really aspired to the truth, if they really aspire to the truth, they must acknowledge that there is some probability that what they think is untrue. If somebody thinks there's no probability, 0% that what they think, if somebody thinks that is trying to claim to you that what they're saying is true with 100% probability, there's a 100% probability they are lying. So, truth with acknowledged error, where you aim to minimize that error over time. That's what community notes is. I think also, once someone gets community noted, they think twice about being deceptive in the future. So you start getting noted a few times, people are like, uh-oh.
I know someone who's been community noted.
Yeah.
No one's immune, meaning
Yes.
you've been community noted on this CNN, fake Chiron. CNN made no such claim that, free speech on Twitter by allowing people to speak freely.
Yeah.
And you were quickly community noted on a satirical tweet, and community said, this is not accurate. Is this the one you tweeted, community notes for the win? I think you may have.
Yeah, I mean, the important thing is that anyone can be noted, including me. And in fact, I wanted to make a note of being noted. The point is that if I can be noted, anyone can be noted, including advertisers. So we've had a few cases where the advertising wasn't accurate and it got noted.
Oh, the mortgage one, loan money to yourself. I think I saw that.
Loan money to yourself. Yeah, sure.
Right, and so, but it's your own customer, and they can be noted, and then
Yes.
and then presumably change the ad.
Yes, I mean this will, I think, be very helpful in truth in advertising.
Okay.
I can't emphasize enough. The goal is rigorous pursuit of the truth, aspirationally the whole truth, and the least amount of untruth. Yeah.
So let's talk back about brand safety. We'll go through two quick ones here. One narrative that's out there that probably affected advertisers and agencies was Twitter was going to become this hotbed of hate speech. And shortly after the acquisition, there was this bot attack you've talked about that seemed designed to try to make that a self-fulfilling prophecy, actually, until it was quickly defeated by your team. And there's 50% less hate speech, according to what your team has put out.
Yeah.
This is a graphic, than pre-acquisition. So not only is it a priority for you, but less, half as much as before. And then on child sexual exploitation, something that's been so important to you, 800K suspended accounts, that's 4 times more than in any month of the prior year. of your ownership, and a 99% reduction in successful searches for CSE patterns. So talk to us about how much of a priority this is and how successful you've been at it, but then also presumably more can be done.
Yeah, I've repeatedly said to the trust and safety team at Twitter that the number one priority, which will always be the number one priority no matter what, is ensuring that children are safe on Twitter, that there's no child exploitation. So that is number one priority always and forever. And what I've been told is that we've done more to eliminate this on Twitter in the last 4 months than has been done in the last 10 years. And it will continue to be number one priority. You know, 100-fold reduction in CSE search patterns is pretty gigantic, to say the least. Yeah, it's absolute number one.
So continued on brand safety, you know, this Global Alliance for Responsible Media's brand safety floor, the GARM, you know, Twitter Business had tweeted out earlier in the year that in testing, at least 99% of measured ad impressions appeared on content that exceeded that floor. So, you know, what message do you have for your advertisers when you're talking to a CMO, to the head of an agency, just in total? I think you touched on this a little, if there's anything to add, but brand safety is in fact a top priority with a team all over it, and technology and humans focused on the subject?
Yeah, as I said, I mean, with respect to brand safety, it really it depends a lot on the brand. I mean, if you've got sort of, you know, kind of. By the way, Disney is a major advertiser on Twitter worldwide. One of our biggest advertisers. Apple's one of our biggest advertisers. But Disney, of course, does not want to have their ads next to things that aren't appropriate for a family audience. But there are other products that are kind of more, you know, R-rated, if you will, and so they're more comfortable with their advertising being in the equivalent of like an R-rated movie or something like that. So brand safety varies depending upon what brand you're talking about. Is it a family brand or less family brand? But advertisers can actually adjust how much, what content they're comfortable having their advertising appear next to. The same is true on TV. So the advertising that you'll see at, say, 7 p.m. is different from the advertising that you'll see at midnight. And so we have the same functionality on Twitter. So it's really up to the advertiser where they want to put their content. But I think by far the most important thing is that the advertising is effective, that it is relevant, and that it moves the needle for a company. The advertising relevance is the most gigantic thing. And this is going to sound totally bizarre, but Twitter did not consider relevance in advertising until 3 months ago. And in fact, if you've used Twitter for a long time, which probably many of you have, you should say, like, how many products have you bought off Twitter? Probably 0. Judging by the laughter, probably 0. So, and your time is incredibly valuable.
Flamethrower? No one bought a flamethrower?
Well, I mean, it's possible that they might have bought things from, you know, content-based tweets, because the content that's recommended is reasonably relevant, but the advertising has not been. So as we moved to shift towards the advertising being relevant and timely, this is really, like I said, advertising that is relevant and timely is information, it is content. And the value of the time of 130 million person hours of the smartest people on Earth is insanely valuable. And frankly, historically, with the advertising being mostly irrelevant in the past, we've been wasting people's time, and that's not good. Going forward, Twitter will have very relevant, useful advertising, and because it is useful, because it is relevant, there will be a massive increase in revenue because it is now useful. So I'm very optimistic about the future. It's been a very difficult 4 months, but I'm optimistic about the future.
Appreciate that. So let's get back to a democratic platform for all. You've said there's no permanent suspensions of anyone on the left. You've brought back both left and right, but I think what you've tweeted is you had to unban a lot more on the right because that's who was banned for the most part. But your goal is equally unbanned, complete equal level playing field for all sides of the political spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, I think the objective reality for anyone looking at Twitter for the longest time was that Twitter had a massive thumb on the scale on the left side. Twitter would ban and suspend accounts on the right 10 times more than on the left. So, and that's like naturally what you'd expect, frankly, because where are we? We're in San Francisco, which is deep, deep blue. So Twitter was controlled by the far left. So the natural thing that would happen then is suppression of moderates, not just suppression of the right, but even suppression of moderate voices. So, but that's not conducive to a healthy national dialogue. In order to have a healthy national dialogue, you have to represent the whole country, and you have to represent everyone in other countries too. It's got to be, that's the only way to have a town square. And so, yeah, there were disproportionately more accounts unsuspended and unshadow banned on the right because Twitter had a huge thumb on the scale in favor of the left. So that's, but if you say, like, have we been suspending accounts on the left? Have we been shadow banning accounts on the left? No, we haven't. So because exactly what I said is we are doing, which is to make it an even playing field. And you know something is freedom of the speech when you're hearing speech that from someone you don't like, and what you're saying, you don't like what they're saying. Otherwise, it's not free speech. And if you don't have that ability, then sooner or later, that suppression of speech is going to be turned on you. So it is a good sign if you're seeing people you don't like say things you don't like. That is a good sign, not a bad sign, because it means, and provided you can say your piece too. I think this is fundamental. I mean, the reason I did the Twitter acquisition was not because I thought this would be some lucrative gold mine. And in fact, it has been arduous and difficult with and being dumped on every day. Well, that's not the most fun thing in the world. But if we do not have a strong foundation of free speech, I fear for the future of our civilization. We must have this. That's why I did it.
Thank you for doing it. Switching gears, a media narrative that may have some accuracy. They're not all inaccurate. The code base is difficult to change. Tech debt, unwieldy. Rube Goldberg machine is a term you've used. So is
fractal Rube Goldberg.
Fractal Rube Goldberg. This is
like,
at least partially accurate, if not accurate.
Yes. Well, yes. The code base is like a Rube Goldberg machine, and when you zoom in on one part of the Rube Goldberg machine, there's another Rube Goldberg machine, and then there's another one.
This is your penguin.
That's what I mean by the fractal. A fractal, as you zoom in, it's just another fractal and another fractal, fractal Rube Goldberg machine. So it's quite difficult to keep this thing running, and then also difficult to advance the product because it is really overly complex, to say the least. And we'll make a change, what appears to be a small change somewhere, that then causes a massive disruption. So, for example, just yesterday, we made what we thought was a small change, and we'll put out we want to be in the sort of full disclosure of everything, including gruesome details. But essentially there was what was supposed to be a small change to 1% of the Twitter user base ended up being a catastrophic change to 100% of the Twitter user base. We don't have enough time to go into the details, but there was a Boolean flag in the Twitter front end that should not have been there, we fixed that. But it's let me give you like a silly example. At one point there was a problem with Twitter Spaces where suspended users were able to join conversations even though they were suspended, and we temporarily turned off access to Twitter Spaces, which then made anyone who is using the Twitter Android app unable to like tweets. Now, how those things are connected is not clear. So if you were
in the Rube Goldberg fractally.
That's what I'm saying. So if you had an iOS app, you could like tweets. If you were on the web app, you could like tweets, but not if you had an Android app because of Spaces. And you're like, what? So one of the things we're doing, there's a lot of work behind the scenes in simplifying the code base, getting rid of extraneous features, and enabling Twitter to evolve more rapidly in the future. But it requires a lot of cleanup, essentially. Yeah.
So, you've grown users despite this lean engineering team and the code base being unwieldy, and cloud spend 40% down, cut out a data center. Mm-hmm. Is this due to the strength of the engineering team that you've been able to achieve this and introduce subscription and other features while trying to hold it all together? And where does that engineering team go to accomplish both the code base enhancements and all the features you've said you want to introduce?
Yeah, I think on balance we're doing okay because, and just to give you a sense of where things were at the close of acquisition on, say, October 29th, Twitter was tracking to a negative $3 billion a year burn rate, and had $1 billion in the bank. So that's a pretty dire situation. If 2023 had been a normal year, Twitter would have done something on the order of $4.5 billion in revenue, $4.5 billion in cost, roughly break even. But when you add $1.5 billion of debt servicing to that, and a massive decline in advertising, some of it cyclic, some of it political, but call it at least a 50% decline in revenue, roughly a 50% decline in revenue, you've got over $3 billion negative. Now, Twitter has some revenue that's not advertising based, so
data services.
Exactly. Data subscriptions and whatnot. But it was in the absence of action, Twitter would have had $6 billion in cost and $3 billion in revenue, so minus $3 billion, and with $1 billion in the bank. So it would have gone bankrupt in 4 months. So immediate and drastic action had to be taken, which was, and so we actually have now cut the burn to the non-interest burn to roughly $1.5 billion. So we've got $1.5 billion of debt servicing and $1.5 billion of expenditures. We went from 3 data centers to 2, and reduced our cloud expenditures significantly, and while at the same time having the fastest product evolution in Twitter's history. So overall, not bad. There've been a few bumps along the road, obviously, but this is to be expected. And now I think we have the opportunity to grow it into something quite spectacular. We have the highest total user minutes in Twitter history. So the real number to care about is actually not the MDAU monthly, which is theoretically monetizable daily active users, but it's user time. How many total user hours per day do you have? That's the real figure of merit. Because one could, for example, say go to 300 million daily active users, but if they spent less time on the system, cumulatively, that would actually be a downgrade. It's how much human attention are you worth? And that's where I think, like I said, that the really profound thing is what Twitter has is roughly 130 million hours of the smartest, most influential people on Earth every single day. There's nothing else that has that. I mean, there are social networks that have more users, but they do not have the smart, influential people. They don't have you.
So if I do the math on what you've said about the advertiser pause and revenue decline and the cost changes, it's EBITDA profitable today, and then you're looking for cash flow break even after debt service.
Well, it's EBITDA profitable, but the D in the EBITDA is quite big.
The D is big, right? When do you get to cash flow break even with the D? When do you get to cash flow break even after that D?
This is where we need to focus on the E part.
Yes.
I hope we pay taxes.
And the T.
Yeah. So, like I said, I mean, we're getting to the point where we're close to having the total expenditures for the company, excluding debt, roughly equal to the debt.
Okay. Cash flow break even.
Yeah, that's what I think. Like, I think we'll be there in Q2.
In Q2.
And then, like, I definitely don't want to count chickens before they hatch or jinx it or anything. But I think we've got a shot at being cash flow positive next quarter in Q2.
Okay. So some of that'll depend on advertisers. So we'll talk quickly about advertising. You've mentioned it a few times. The value is clear: 147 billion impressions on Twitter of World Cup 22, and 50% year-over-year growth in NFL video views. 39% increase in Super Bowl mentions. The NFL putting out engagements never been higher. And then WPP's CEO, Mark Reed, said 10 days or however long ago this was, February 24, Twitter seems to be more stable, and I think advertising clients presumably here, will look about coming back to Twitter. So are you in touch with agency and CMOs, and is this a theme? I think we just saw McDonald's or others coming back as they realize you are absolutely focused on the things you were said not to be focused on in terms of brand safety, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think really what I'd say to advertisers and brands is, use Twitter yourself and believe what you see on Twitter, not what you read in the newspapers. Because what you see on Twitter is the real thing, and what you read in newspapers is not. I'd like to thank Mark Reed and WPP for their support, and Publicis and others, and for the advertisers that have stuck with us, like Disney and Apple. Thank you.
So that's brand advertising. You've mentioned a few times performance advertising. I think I've heard your story about White Lotus, which maybe you can share here. Performance-based advertising has been very lucrative for other companies and can be made more relevant on a more narrowcast basis, if you will, than pure brand advertising. So when do you introduce performance-based advertising and scale it?
We introduced from the moment the acquisition closes, like we have to have performance-based advertising is really just advertising that is relevant.
Relevant.
In fact, we should really have aspirationally zero non-performance-based advertising. We want advertising that matters. People's attention is precious. We should not serve them ads that are annoying or irrelevant or strident or ugly. And it's interesting you mentioned White Lotus. I actually was talking to David Zaslav, who's great, and he was like, hey, why can't we put a White Lotus trailer every time someone mentions White Lotus on Twitter. I'm like, absolutely. So, like one of the super obvious but profound things that we're doing is enabling keyword advertising so that you can enter the keywords and like White Lotus, and if somebody mentions White Lotus, you put the White Lotus trailer there. I mean, this sounds very obvious.
You don't need GPT-3 for this.
We don't need advanced AI for this one. You know, it's sort of just Google AdWords, but applied to tweets and the home timeline and replies and everywhere else. Because you'll often have very sort of long, deep conversations, people going on, talking about movies, TV, products, and whatnot, and that's the perfect opportunity for advertisers to provide their message. You know, if I think about something, for example, like Starlink, which does advertise in various media, for Starlink, would want to advertise to users in regions that are not already saturated. So Starlink tends to be saturated in urban areas, but is not saturated in rural areas. And so what Starlink would like to do is like say, please show the ad to rural users with a slow connection. And then the simple message is, do you want faster internet for less money? Click. Probably you do. And Twitter needs to be able to do a simple thing like that, and it will be. And in fact, it is already able to do that. We just haven't fully rolled it out. So we're I think around 20%-ish, but by the end of this year, almost all advertising should be reasonably relevant.
And that your Starlink example comes back to your disposable income, if you want to, or the education level and the ability to buy and afford the Starlink subscription of the Twitter user. Like it also dovetails back into that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think there's also an opportunity here to have advertising be much like really improve the relevance of advertising using AI in the sense that based on what tweets somebody views, likes, and whatever, you can actually populate a parameter space, an ML parameter space, and then you can take an ad, and even if you say nothing about that ad, after it's dropped in the Twitter system and it has 10,000 views, you populate a parameter space of the ad, and then you correlate the user parameter space and the ad parameter space, and then you don't need to do any demographic targeting, because you could be like, say it's a gardening ad. Well, you could be 20, 30, 40, you could be 70 years old, any sex, whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is you like gardening. And that's the ad that should be shown. And so I think we can get away from a lot of the sort of targeting by age range and sex and whatever in favor of targeting by interest. And a lot of these sort of demographic targeting was done coming from a TV or newspaper era where you don't have interaction with the user. You just have to kind of guess, because it's a one-way street in TV. But on Twitter, it's not a one-way street. There's continuous interaction. So I think we can just have a profoundly more useful advertising experience.
So let's close on Twitter before getting to another couple companies I've heard that you run. The vision you're building towards, I think you've called it X, or the Everything app.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. You know, beyond just improving the advertising and you know, what will we be able to do on Twitter in your grandest vision?
Yeah, so X.com is, so I think it's possible to create a very powerful finance experience, basically. Kind of like PayPal is kind of like a halfway version of what I think could be done in payments and finance. And so you want to be like, let's say you want to be able to send money easily from one account on X/Twitter to another account effortlessly with one click. You want to be able to, I think, earn interest on the money. You want to be able to have debt, so your interest can go negative. I mean, basically, I think it's possible to become the biggest financial institution in the world. So just by providing people with convenient payment options, we don't have the time to go into it in detail here, except if we just make the app more and more useful, people will use it more, and it'll be great. I mean, yeah, so you'll see.
Okay. We're still on Twitter for a moment, but we had, in Austin, thank you for hosting, at the Investor Day, and you showcased 16 executives on stage at various times with you, an incredibly deep and built-out management team. And I think the executive team with you at Twitter, is perhaps a bit leaner. Maybe there's a media narrative here that's accurate. So
look, he does have a black turtleneck as well.
So
do you need anything more? I don't think so.
So when does the Twitter management team have that bench like you showcased at the Gigafactory?
Well, I think it takes a long time to build a strong management team, and we built the Tesla management team over 20 years. So I think Twitter is an easier problem than Tesla by a long shot. But it'll take some time to build the team, and I don't know, probably a few years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And switching gears, you shared Master Plan 3 at the Gigafactory, and the edit that came to my mind was Master Planet after your first piece there on sustainable energy for all of Earth. Can you take us through that positive, optimistic, mathematically underpinned vision for our planet?
Okay, there's not a lot of time to do that, but I guess the overall message is that we can absolutely make Earth, turn Earth into a sustainable energy economy, fully sustainable, using lithium-ion batteries, solar, wind, as well as geothermal, nuclear, and other things, but primarily it'll be solar and wind, and lithium-ion batteries. And our calculation is you need roughly 240 terawatt-hours of lithium-ion batteries. Most of those will be iron phosphate lithium, of the iron phosphate variety. In other words, with a primarily iron cathode, which is a plentiful material. In fact, Earth is the number one element on Earth is actually iron. A little factoid. I think Earth by mass is about 32% iron and about 30% oxygen, and then everything else is miscellaneous. So we're like a muddy rust ball. So plenty of iron. Basically, the materials needed to make 240 terawatt-hours of batteries are actually plentiful on Earth. We don't need to mow down the Amazon or anything like that. We don't need to basically do anything terrible to the environment to create 240 terawatt-hours of batteries. In fact, there will be less mining required in a sustainable energy economy than is currently required. Really, this is a message of hope and optimism grounded in physical reality. It is not wishful thinking. So we should be excited and inspired about the future. And I'm not suggesting complacency or anything like that, or that we should, and getting there faster is better than getting there slower. But what we don't need to live some terrible austere life and give up the things that we like. You can have the things that you like, in fact, even more of them, and the environment can be good. All the good things are possible, is what I'm saying. We should be excited and optimistic about the future. We need to go build it. It's a lot of work. But you should not feel sad about the future regarding sustainable energy. It will happen. We just want to make it happen faster rather than slower.
So that was the first big takeaway. You know, the next one that I had was this, your next phase of vertical integration, the relentless first principles thinking on vehicle design, battery design, factory optimization, you know, at the same time as the vehicle, that could lead to a target, I guess, of this, you know, 50% step change in cost when the new gen eventually comes around. Can you just take us through the quick summary of that, and it unlocks the next wave of the TAM because there's price elasticity, is what you were sharing on this subject as the second big takeaway for Tesla?
Yeah, I mean, there's a clear path to making a smaller vehicle that is roughly half the production cost and difficulty of our Model 3. That vehicle will be, really used almost entirely in autonomous mode. The thing that is really gigantic for Tesla is autonomy. And if people have used the Tesla Full Self-Driving and have seen how rapidly the Full Self-Driving capability has been evolving, it should be obvious that that is by far the most profound thing. The sort of total addressable market stuff, it's like, guys, this is like actually not the right way to think about it. It's like passenger vehicles right now only see about 10 to 12 hours of use per week. There's 168 hours in a week. If those vehicles are autonomous, they're probably going to get used for 50 or 60 hours a week. That's a 5x increase in the value of a car, and it costs the same to make the car. At that point, you basically have software margins in a hardware product. It's insane. Total addressable market is everyone, all humans.
Powerful. So let's switch gears to SpaceX, hitting first Starlink. What can you tell us about Starlink and the scale and deployment and how that's going?
Yeah, the Starlink team is doing an amazing job. More than half of all satellites in orbit right now are Starlink satellites. So if you add up all satellites launched cumulatively, they are less than Starlink. So Starlink is currently providing global connectivity. You can get connectivity anywhere on Earth, from the most remote part of Antarctica to San Francisco, anywhere. It's full global connectivity, high bandwidth, and low latency. The latency is important because unless you're in low Earth orbit, you cannot get low latency. The geostationary satellites are up, very, very high. You've sort of got sometimes up to a second of latency from a geostationary satellite, all things inclusive. Whereas with Starlink satellites, we believe we can get the latency under 20 milliseconds. And in fact, for international communications, an interesting thing is that in fiber, light travels much slower than in aero vacuum. So in rough approximation, light travels about 300 kilometers per millisecond in air and vacuum, but only just roughly over 200 kilometers per millisecond in fiber. So you got like a sort of roughly 40% increase in speed of light going through the Starlink system than through fiber, and it can also follow a more direct route instead of following the sort of coastline of the continents. It can actually have a more direct route. So it's a shorter route and inherently faster from a physics standpoint. So it connects the world way better than fiber. And it will provide and is providing connectivity to people that either never had it before or where their options were extremely expensive or very low bandwidth. So it's helping out a lot of communities that never had access, especially when you consider that education is digital these days. That's really how you can learn anything. You can basically learn anything. You can basically learn anything for free on the internet if you have the internet. So in terms of providing education abilities to remote communities, Starlink is doing a lot of good in that regard.
Lastly, the launch, whether Falcon 9 Heavy or Starship, I think you had the static fire test that went well, and what can you tell us about the next phase on launch for Starship?
Yeah, so we're getting ready for the first launch of Starship. This is a very difficult program. The rocket is roughly 2.5 times the thrust of a Saturn V. So if or once it reaches orbit, it'll be by far the biggest rocket to reach orbit. But more importantly, it is designed to be the first fully reusable rocket, orbital rocket ever. So the key to extending life beyond Earth is a fully and rapidly reusable orbital rocket. This is a very hard problem given the constraints of Earth. Earth has a thick atmosphere and strong gravity. It is only barely possible to do this. That's why it has not been done before. But we're getting close for our first orbital attempt of Starship. Hopefully in the next month or so, we'll have our first attempt. I'm not saying it'll get to orbit, but I am guaranteeing excitement. So it won't be boring. I think it's got, I don't know, hopefully above 50% chance of reaching orbit. And then we're building a whole series of Starships in South Texas. And so I think we've got, I don't know, hopefully about an 80% chance of reaching orbit this year. It'll probably take us a couple more years to achieve full and rapid reusability, which I can't emphasize enough it is the profound breakthrough that is needed to extend life beyond Earth, because it lowers the cost of access to space by orders of magnitude. In the same way that if let's say there were no airplanes that were reusable, how expensive would air flight be? It would be insane. You'd have to buy a new airplane every time you flew somewhere, and you have to tow a small airplane behind you for the return flight. So, that's just not going to scale. So assuming things go well there, this vehicle it could make life multiplanetary. That's a really big deal. It could make life on Mars real. And I think that's one of the great filters that any civilization has to pass through, which is, does the civilization become multiplanetary or not? This is one of the elements of the Fermi paradox. I sort of wonder that if we are able to get to multiplanetary, that'll be a forcing function for ultimately improving spaceflight to become multistellar, to go to other star systems. And I think we may discover that there are many long-dead one-planet civilizations. We don't want to be one of those. We don't want to be one of those lame one-planet civilizations. Please.
I think we're going to wrap on that. Thank you, Elon Musk.
All right, thanks.